Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It's your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a model made between 2015 and 2020. 34 millimeters and 904L stainless steel. It is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 34, reference 114200. It has the much sought White Grape dial. There is a lot to love about this watch, which I consider to be a unisex option. Now, you can see it's 34 millimeters in diameter by 11.6 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip, 41.7 millimeters, and then from end link to end link, it is 43.6 millimeters across the wrist with a 19 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We're going to throw this watch on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. You can see, like all Oyster cases, it's really more of a cushion case than a round case, and visually it looks a little bit bigger than it is. It reads visually more like a 36, so if you want some discretion with your White Grape dialed Rolex, this isn't a bad way to do it. It'll fit underneath a dress cuff, no problem with a tight sleeve. It's a thin watch and it has a nicely sloped case flank. You can see that it's short when viewed from the cuff angle, it's narrow when viewed from the top, and then down the barrel, I've got plenty of clearance on each side. I recommend it for all wrist sizes, including children. This is a wonderfully versatile timepiece. It is a sports watch. It is a descendant of the original Oyster Perpetual, the watch that in 1933 combined the Oyster water-resistant case with the Perpetual rotor winding system to create not just the first modern Rolex watch, but also something approaching the very first mass-produced sports watch. And this watch really is part of the canon of Rolex. The Oyster Perpetual is no less core canonical Rolex than the GMT Master, the Submariner, or the Daytona. This precedes all of them. Now, the timepiece is handsomely made. We'll get a little bit closer and view some of its details, as it has an Oyster-style bracelet, 3 links, satin finishing on the top. It is a tapered bracelet with polished outer faces, removable links fixed by screws, and you can see that on both sides of the clasp. You can also see that there are several divots drilled inside the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point of the bracelet inside the clasp. Externally, we have the embossed Rolex 5-point crown and satin on the top with polish on the flanks. It is a lift lock system with a beak and a hook, so while it may appear friction fit, you can't just really yank it open. You do have to lift and unlock it, so it gives you that extra measure of security. You can see that the clasp itself is polished and the interior of the clasp is media blasted. The case is the Oyster case, satinated on its tops, polished on its flanks. It's not the super case. It's not sheer. The domed profile of the bezel blends naturally into the curvature of the case flank. It's actually quite handsome and organic. We have a twin lock crown, screw-down lock, 100 meters water-resistant, 904L steel. Rolex makes its clasps, its bracelets, its cases, its dials, and its movements, but it makes all of these external parts out of its own steel because it has its own foundry. 904L steel, it's not harder than 316L, but it is more resistant to corrosion. For example, you don't need to rinse it after exposure to sweat or sea salt. It's just a little bit tougher. Taking a look at the dial, you can see why it's called White Grape. There's also a red grape dial. Sometimes they're discussed as the red wine and the white wine dials, and now you know where those terms come from. Back in 2015, we were quite amused at the colors that Rolex was coining on its new Oyster Perpetuals, and you can see it's not just one, it's 2. We have these lovely cyan accents outboard of the white gold indices. We have all applique indices, hands, logo, as well as indices in white golds that will not tarnish or oxidize over time. Now, the watch is loomed, as you can see. Rolex also looms this watch generously, so that you have the ability to read your Oyster Perpetual in the dark. I'll wind it up so you can see it in action. But of course, it does feature a lovely sunburst grain to the White Grape, which is vibrant, almost golden in color. Some light adds yellowness, some light adds whiteness. It varies from solid gold in color to a sort of silver gold, so it's got some dynamism to it. Now, of course, the movement also features hacking seconds, and what's inside the case underneath the solid case back is Rolex manufactured caliber 3130, automatic winding, bidirectional winding, 48-hour power reserve, stop seconds, 31 joules, 4 hertz beat rate. It's got a full balance bridge with a free-sprung balance for shock resistance, a handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring so that it keeps even time in any position and earns its COSC chronometer certification, and then And of course, that hairspring is in blue oxidized niobium zirconium alloy called Parachrome Blue that is highly anti-magnetic. So this watch winds up being anti-magnetic, shock resistant, and highly water resistant. And of course, chronometer certified atop all of that. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.